Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Real Sports Updates here. Back again with another video. You see the title. You see the thumbnail. Now, this is a big little story, if you will. This is a small story by definition at this point right now, but this is a real story. And I'm going to give you reasons why this is a real story. So, it was reported the other day that Sean Payton, he is interested in coaching again, but pretty much on his terms, right? There are just a few teams that he would consider coming out of retirement to coach, right? Chargers, Cowboys, and there was somebody else. I forgot. It doesn't matter. But this is about the Chargers and what the Chargers need to get accomplished this year. Now, I don't think that the Chargers need to win the Super Bowl this year, but I do think the Chargers have to have a really good regular season, and they have to compete in the playoffs, right? Again, you don't need to win the Super Bowl, but they're going to need to compete in the playoffs. They're going to need to get to an AFC championship game, right? They're going to need to probably at the very least get to a divisional. And they're not, if they do get to a divisional, they do get to an AFC championship game, you can't lose because of offense, because that would be the number one reason why Brandon Staley would get fired. Now, this is, like I said, this is a little big story because this is little right now. The season's going to start. Everybody's going to forget about this once the games, start coming, and, people are looking forward to watching football every Sunday, right? This is why it's little. But it is big because this puts pressure on Brandon Staley, right? And this is my number one point. There's real pressure on Brandon Staley this year. And this is a unique situation, right? Most coaches don't go through this, right? But if a guy who won a Super Bowl, right, with Drew Brees, in New Orleans, and completely turned around a franchise that was desolate, right? Anybody remember the Saints before Sean Payton got there? They were terrible, man. They were awful. The whole organization, from top to bottom, just was irrelevant. I remember Aaron Brooks. I remember being a fan of him. I thought he was talented, and he went to New Orleans and he was trash, and the whole team was trash, right? I remember the Saints before Sean Payton and Drew Brees got there, and they were kind of Cleveland Brownish, I would say. They were in the same category as the Cleveland Browns. They were kind of a joke, and I think the fans had a lot more pride there than they do in Cleveland, and so I think that was probably the difference. But they were in that area. So Drew Brees, Sean Payton, they get to New Orleans, they turn the whole entire organization around, right? There's a lot of good players who have come into the Saints organization, right? They've had a lot of success. They've won one Super Bowl, but I don't necessarily think that is Sean Payton's fault. But I will get to that later in this video. So there is going to be real pressure on Brandon Staley. All the going forward and stuff on fourth down, the extra aggressive, extra reckless coaching style. I think he's got to tone that down a little bit, because if he starts doing that and those decisions start blowing up in his face, it's going to be bad. And, with a guy like Sean Payton out there, especially for ownership, right? The Spanos family. A guy like Sean Payton out there and expressing interest in coaching your team, you're going to sit down and listen, right? And I get it, and I love Brandon Staley. I love his demeanor as a coach, right? I love how he, tries to connect with the players, and I love how he, is just open, right? He's a player's coach, and he's a guy, he has respect of the players in the locker room. So I'm not saying that the players don't respect him, but the thing about Sean Payton is he's a Super Bowl winning coach, and it doesn't matter what team, you're a fan of. It doesn't matter who your team has or whatever. A Super Bowl winning coach holds a lot of credence with owners, with ownership. And this is what people need to understand. Ownership is the one making the decisions, right? The fans, you can say whatever we want. We can say whatever we want about Brandon Staley. We can compliment him until the sun, comes out, the following day. But ownership is looking at this situation and saying, do we want to keep this young coach, right, who is smart, and everybody knows that he's smart, right? But do we want this young coach who has, and let's just say the Chargers don't get to where they want to get this year, right? Let's say they lose in the wild card round. That would count as underachieving, right? So you would be able to say for 2 years in a row that the Chargers have underachieved under Brandon Staley. Have there been improvements and things like that? Yes, but you would be able to clearly say that the Chargers have underachieved. So as far as ownership goes, how are they going to look? Are they going to look at it like, okay, we're going to stick besides this coach, even though we've underachieved? Or are we going to sit down and are we going to listen to the Super Bowl winning coach, and are we going to listen to his plan and what he has planned for Justin Herbert, for the Chargers offense, so on and so forth, right? This is a ownership thing, and I think the fans, all of us fans, need to understand this. So this puts real pressure on Brandon Staley, and that's the number one thing that you can take away from it. But I think Brandon Staley's a good coach, and I think he will have a good season. So I don't think that it will bother him, but there's going to be real pressure on him now. This is pressure for a second-year head coach, right? All of the talent that the Chargers have acquired, the offseason that they've had, this is going to be, a real pressurized season for Brandon Staley. Now, if, worst come to worst and the Chargers do let him go, I think he would have a head coaching job, the same day if he wanted it. But this is a real thing that is going to be there for Staley, right? And, he's a smart guy. He's very thoughtful, and, he's not going to mention anything about this in press conferences, but it's got to be at the back of his mind, right? This is here. This is here, and the pressure is real. So that's number one. Number two, Justin Herbert, Sean Payton, right? This could be one of, if this were to happen, right, this could be one of the greatest quarterback-coach pairings of all time, right? Because both guys are great at their jobs, right? We know Justin Herbert's one of the top quarterbacks. We know Sean Payton is, one of the top coaches in the league, right? And especially one of the top offensive minds in the league. Now, what I was saying earlier, when the Saints, Drew Brees, Sean Payton, they were only able to win one Super Bowl, I think most of that is due to the limitations that Drew Brees had as a quarterback. And as good as Drew Brees was, as prolific of numbers that he put up, his limitations as a quarterback were always there, right? 6 feet tall, very slenderly built, right? 200 pounds, whatever. And, an arm that was below average as far as the strength, goes, right? Now, accuracy was his thing, but as far as arm strength goes, it wasn't there. It just wasn't there. And, Drew Brees was never a guy that had a huge arm, but I remember him coming out of college, his stature was more of the reason why he went in the second round, not the first round. But, his arm strength was never strength of, any of his attributes as a quarterback, right? It's him processing information, being able to learn, whatever offense that he's in, and being able to deliver the ball accurately. Now, those limitations really did hinder Sean Payton, right? Because if you watch go back and watch the Saints game from the glory years, right? The creativity on offense for the Saints was ridiculous. It was amazing. There were times where the Saints were not able to take advantage of everybody, all the weapons that they had, right? Because Drew Brees was not particularly able to throw the ball downfield, with a strong throw, and, obviously his accuracy wasn't as great downfield. He did throw a lot of interceptions. I think a lot of his interceptions came past like 15 yards or something like that. So he was not a great thrower of the ball downfield, obviously. He did put up the numbers, he put up the stats, and he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback, right? He will be a Hall of Famer, obviously, but he had limitations there. I think when you look at a situation like this, and you look at the hypothetical Sean Payton, coaching the Los Angeles Chargers, those same limitations that he had on Drew Brees would not be there with Justin Herbert. The offensive creativity would still be there, but the limitations would be gone. And I think when, if you are, again, the Chargers underachieved this year, right? If offense is not up to snuff, if things are not going the way that we all expect them to go, this could be a real conversation, right? And again, I go back to ownership. Ownership is looking at this. Can Sean Payton do to Justin Herbert what he did to Drew Brees? The obvious answer is yes, because Justin Herbert doesn't need the offense to be catered around his limitations. He can do everything. He can make, the short 5-yard throws, and he can make throws all the way down the field. He's got one of the biggest arms in the league. So I think when it comes to that, those limitations are not there with Justin Herbert. And I think if you are looking at, again, the hypothetical situation, if you're looking at ownership, if you're looking at, maybe we need to go in another direction, that's an upgrade from Joe Lombardi, right? Joe Lombardi is running the great value Saints offense. This is not the Saints offense. This is not the Sean Payton offense. Joe Lombardi is not the offensive mind that Sean Payton is, and not even close. He's not even in his neighborhood. He was there in New Orleans, for a lot, and I'm sure he learned a lot, but he does not have the offensive mind that Sean Payton has. Sean Payton is an innovative offensive coach, and, he was able to do so much with, not a whole lot as far as, just raw talent from the quarterback position. He really didn't have that. Drew Brees was a guy I went over what his strengths were, but as far as just raw talent, physical talent, he didn't have it. And Justin Herbert does. So, again, that's intriguing. If you're looking at what the possibility of this is, you have to go straight to ownership. Look at the Spanos family. And Dean Spanos, is he looking at this and saying, man, I seen what he did with Drew Brees. I know he can win 3 or 4 Super Bowls with Justin Herbert. This is the thought process. And I'm just saying, none of this is what I'm thinking, but I'm just trying to hop into the head of the Spanos families, Dean Spanos in particular. These are things that could come up, right, when they're having this conversation, if this conversation is going to be had, at some point during the season, off season, whatever, right? So I'm just trying to jump into his head and just present facts that if you are mulling this over, right, these are things that you're going to bring up, right? You're going to go straight to the success that he had with Drew Brees. You're going to go straight to all of, the offensive success that they had in New Orleans, right? Even some of the stuff that he did with Taysom Hill and all of that stuff, like, you're going to go and look at that and you're going to say, wow, like, that's pretty impressive. So again, I'm just trying to take a walk in the mind of a rich billionaire NFL owner. Now, the third and final point that I have regarding this is something that's a little underrated, but I think people should also look at this as well too. Do not underestimate the impact that Drew Brees might have on this situation if it were to happen, right? Drew Brees, he was a guy, he played for the Chargers, right? We all know that. His time in San Diego wasn't, all great. It was, just kind of average, I would say. And obviously the way that it ended, it did not end on a good note. So, that's there as well too. But Drew Brees as a guy, he hung around the Chargers last year, pretty much in OTAs. I think he was at some of the training camps, some of the training camp practices. I think, they photographed him and they videoed him a lot, around the Chargers, around Justin Herbert. Obviously he has that connection with Joe Lombardi, so he was, kind of around, right? Now, Drew Brees can play an integral role in this if the Spanos family is dead set on saying, okay, we need to go in another direction, right? We went with Staley for a couple of years. We are not where we should be. And I think this is where Drew Brees can have a huge impact because obviously it's out there now, right? Sean Payton is interested in the Chargers. Who is kind of the in-between guy, the mediary, if you will, right? It's Drew Brees, right? Because Drew Brees, he now has a connection with Justin Herbert, and, Herbert has talked about that in several interviews. And, he obviously has a connection with Joe Lombardi as well, too, right? So Drew Brees is kind of the guy in the middle, right? He can talk to Justin Herbert, right? He can talk to Lombardi, he can talk to the Spanos family, and he can pretty much get that going, right? He can get those two sides in contact with each other, right? And not like they need to have that, but Drew Brees is a guy, he can make this whole situation a lot easier, right? As a go-between guy, right? Because they can talk to Drew and talk to him about some of the things that they did in New Orleans, right? What type of, not just the success that they've had, but what type of impact would Sean Payton have on a Justin Herbert? These are things that Drew Brees can be asked about directly. And, obviously Drew Brees would, tell the truth and say that, yes, Sean Payton is a guy that can take Justin Herbert not only to the next level, but, pretty much put him in Canton, just based off of the way that he would call games, just, some of the things that he can come up with offensively, right? He can be, the Andy Reid to, Patrick Mahomes, right? That kind of thing. He can be that guy to Justin Herbert. And I think if the Spanos family is dead set on going in another direction, that's one of probably the best scenarios that you can envision if you are going to hire a new coach, right? It's there. And again, none of this is what I'm thinking. None of this is what I'm feeling or whatever. I like Brandon Staley, and I think he's going to have success. And I think Brandon Staley's going to bring a Super Bowl to LA. That's how I feel, right? Now, I'm not sold on Joe Lombardi. I have not been quiet about that. They've been showing the Week 18 game against the Raiders in Vegas, the game that ended the season last year. And any Lombardi people, if you're a Lombardi fan, go back and watch that entire game. And I go back and watch the entire game. None of the offensive game plan makes sense. So I'm not saying, hey, sign me up for more of this, because it doesn't make none of what happened made any sense. Justin Herbert made that game competitive. He single-handedly made that game competitive. So please spare me with the Joe Lombardi nonsense. Again, I think Brandon Staley is going to bring a Super Bowl to LA, regardless of who is running the offense. But those are my personal thoughts. I'm just saying, if a Super Bowl winning coach says, hey, I might be interested in coaching this team if there's an opening, right? If there is an opening. That's what I'm saying an owner could look at and say, as much as we like Brandon, he hasn't won a Super Bowl. He hasn't had the successes that, Sean Payton has had in New Orleans. He has not been a perennial playoff coach, right? Getting to conference championship games and all of that stuff, right? That's not there. He just doesn't have the pedigree yet. He's too green, he's too wet behind the ears. He just doesn't have that Sean Payton pedigree. So I am just simply coming on here and just trying to convey what the owners will probably think about this. And if you are a Charger fan, be cognizant of this, right? And again, like I said, I like Brandon Staley, but the Chargers must make some noise this year. They got to make some noise this year. They cannot go out like they did last year. They can't even go out in the first round of the playoffs. They can't go out in the wild card. They're going to have to win. They're going to have to win a playoff game or games in order for Brandon Staley to keep his job, I believe. So this is just a whole nother level of pressure that has been applied now. This is like I said, this is a little big story, but this thing could have legs, and especially if the season doesn't turn out the way that the Chargers want it, this can have some legs. And I just telling everybody, just be aware of that. Just keep in mind. He's put his flag in the sand. Sean Payton has, and he's going to be available. There for the calling if there's an opening around. So it's going to be interesting to see. We'll see what happens. But I just wanted to come on here and kind of just convey what the thoughts of ownership might be and how this situation could play out. But again, I like Brandon Staley. I like his coaching style. I think he's going to be successful, and I think he's the guy that the Chargers need. I think he is the man for this job. And I don't want to see him go anywhere, but I don't own the Chargers, and that's not my call. So, I'm really, really hoping for the best, but everybody just keep this in mind. Just don't let this disappear or whatever. Just keep it in mind just in case, if anything happens, we can go back and look at exactly what I said here and say, okay, this is what is going on. So that's it. That's all I wanted to do. Just come on and just kind of give that perspective. But that's all I got for this one, guys. Thank you so much for the support. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. Don't forget to like this video on the way out as well, too. I will be back tomorrow with much, much more content. Thank you so much, and until next time.